Welcome to a special edition of Hard Talk from Oslo. I'm Stephen Sackur. Today, I have an exclusive interview with the winner of this year's Nobel Peace Prize. President Juan Manuel Santos of Colombia is being honored for his efforts to bring an end to the long war between the Colombian government and the leftist FARC rebels. It has been a difficult, a complex, a controversial process, but a peace deal is now in place. But for all of the accolades here in Oslo, will it work? President Juan Manuel Santos, welcome to Hard Talk and many congratulations on winning the Nobel Peace Prize. How are you feeling right now?
Thank you very much. I'm feeling very happy, very excited, very honored, and very motivated to continue working for the peace in my country.
Over the course of the last 5-6 years that you've been working on this deal, we've spoken several times, and it strikes me that it is, in some ways, almost a miracle that you've gotten to this point, not least because just a few months ago, the people of your country voted on the peace deal you had done, and they rejected it. How big a blow was that?
It was a big blow. I must confess that I didn't expect it. Nobody expected it, not even the people who won. But I am accustomed to following this Chinese proverb, try to find the opportunity from every crisis, and I found that opportunity. The no won for a very, very small margin. And I said, they all wanted peace. Why don't we get together, talk about it, see what you don't like about this agreement. Can we change it? We did that for 45 days. We ended up with a new agreement, which is a better agreement, a stronger agreement. And so it was, in a way, a blessing in disguise.
Well, you can say that with a smile on your face here in Oslo as you're about to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. But the fact is, it did undermine your credibility. Let me just quote to you something that you said to me last time we spoke a year ago in the presidential palace in Bogota. You said to me, the people can say no, we don't like it in the referendum, and then there will be no deal. So I said, with respect, Mr. President, you'll have to resign at that point. And you said, I will be in serious difficulty, but I'm absolutely convinced the overwhelming majority will support me. You were plain wrong.
Yes, I was wrong, and many people nowadays are wrong about plebiscites, about referendums.
It was a terrible mistake, wasn't it?
It was. I'm not sorry about it because I think I did the correct thing. I was not obliged to put the agreement to a referendum. It was on my own initiative. Many people advised me against it, but I did it anyways. I learned my lesson.
But the point is, you could talk about David Cameron after Brexit. You could talk about Matteo Renzi after the recent Italian referendum. They put their credibility on their line, they lost, and they resigned. How close did you come to resigning?
They are in a parliamentary system. We have a presidential system. We have a mandate. I have a mandate from the people of Colombia until August of 2018. And the mandate is you must achieve peace in Colombia. And that's what I'm doing.
Did you come close to resigning? In those dark hours when you realized that just by a very slim majority you'd lost the referendum on the deal, did you consider resigning?
No, I considered that it was my obligation to persevere, to take advantage of the situation, and that's what I did. I persevered, I took advantage of the situation, and now we are in a better position than we were before the plebiscite. 77% of our Congress endorsed this agreement, and the people in the streets went out to support a new agreement, and that's what I'm giving the people.
We'll talk about the detail of the revised agreement in just a minute, but before we get there, just a second, consider for me the impact of the announcement that you'd won the Nobel Peace Prize, because it came literally, I think, 3 days after the reversal that you suffered in the referendum. Would it be fair to say that without that international accolade and the momentum it gave you, you might not have gotten to this point today with a new deal?
It's fair to say, it was 4 days after the plebiscite, it's very fair to say that it was a gift from heaven, and it gave me a great push. And I was in the Navy, and I learned to sail, and when there's no wind, the ship starts to drift, and this came like a big wind that pushed the whole country and me and the whole process to the port of destiny, which was a peace agreement.
Isn't it worrying, though, for the long-term stability of this deal, that you're telling me you probably wouldn't have reached the destination without international support? In the end, it's going to live or fail by the strength of the support it has inside the country. And if it requires the Committee of Nobel to give you the prop that you needed to keep this deal alive, that ultimately is quite worrying.
I've never said that without the Nobel I could not have achieved a new agreement. I have not said that. What I've said is this, of course, encouraged me and the whole of the Colombian people because it was interpreted as a mandate from the international community to continue and to persevere. And that helped a lot.
To what extent do you think the Norwegians ultimately were, in a sense, giving themselves a pat on the back? They'd been important guarantors of the peace negotiation for years. You know, they'd been one of the key players supporting the whole process. And now they give you the Nobel Peace Prize at a moment when you needed support more than ever before. Do you think it was somewhat self-serving from their point of view?
Well, you have to ask them. But what I do say is that the Norwegians have been very helpful since the very beginning. When we started secret talks, they were there, present, helping, supporting, pushing. And they have been following this agreement for 6 years, and I owe a big debt of gratitude to the Norwegians.
Wouldn't this be more convincing as a display of Colombia's commitment to peace if sitting alongside you today, talking to me, about to receive a Nobel Peace Prize, were the leader of the FARC, known as Timoshenko? Why isn't he here? Why is he not receiving the prize? Because it takes two to make peace, just as it does to tango.
That's a question for the Nobel Committee, not for me.
Would you like to see him in a chair next to you, receiving this prize?
Well, we had some difficulties even in bringing him here if he would have been invited, because legally they still are sub judice, and so there's problems with the travel and the arrangements. But the fact is that what I say, they are here in heart and spirit.
What's your personal relationship like with Timoshenko, who is the de facto leader of the FARC?
It's distant. We have developed a degree of trust that allowed us to talk quite openly about certain problems.
Today you can say, hand on heart, I trust him and I believe in his commitments.
Well, I can say today that he has been committed to reach an agreement, because otherwise this would not have been possible. But of course, we are putting in the agreement all type of guarantees for both sides to comply with what was agreed. And we have to stick to those guarantees.
Let's talk a little bit about the detail of the deal, and it is highly complex, so we'll try to keep it simple. Your opponents, led by former president, your former great friend and mentor, Alvaro Uribe, they say that there are two fundamental problems which you have not removed from the agreement despite all of the modifications you've made. Number one, the FARC are not going to be punished for the terrible crimes they committed, crimes of war, crimes against humanity. They are going to go unpunished. They will not be put into jail. And number two, the leaders of the FARC, even those who, during the process of truth-telling, are found to have committed war crimes, they will be allowed to take public office. Some of them will sit in your parliament. And that, to your critics, is an insult to the Colombian people.
Well, former President Uribe himself was the one who presented to the Colombian Congress full amnesty for the M19 guerrillas, no matter what they had done. And that is a fact. Second, it is not true that there is impunity. For the first time in the history of conflict resolutions, of armed conflict resolutions, the two parties got together and agreed on a transitional justice whereby the most responsible will be investigated, judged, and sanctioned by a special tribunal. So there is no impunity, as
they
some
will
say.
not be put in prison where many Colombians believe they belong for all of the atrocities they committed or commanded, ordered.
They will be, they will have an effective restriction of their freedom, of their liberty.
It's not prison. It's not prison.
They will have to repair and restore. This is a new approach to justice, not only in Colombia, in the world, in all the world. And tell me one example where the guerrillas have agreed to lay down their arms and go to jail. There's not one single example. The whole purpose of a peace process is for the armed insurgents to change the bullets for votes. That's the whole purpose of the process. So if you don't allow them to get elected into public office, to continue fighting for their ideas, but in the legal framework, in the democracy, then what's the purpose of a peace process?
But Mr. President, how do you tell the families of those who were assassinated, those who were kidnapped and held for years in the jungle, those whose families were bombed in churches as they sought shelter? How do you persuade all of those people that it is right and proper and just that the men who ordered those actions can in the future sit in your Congress, your lower house, and your Senate, and could, in theory, even run for president?
Well, let me tell you, one of the things I've learned in this process, a process that has very important peculiarities, because this is the first process where the victims are put in the center of the solution of the conflict. And they, the victims, that have been my principal source of support, and they are the ones who are telling me, go ahead, we accept what you are doing. It's the people who have not suffered the conflict directly, the ones that are apprehensive about this particular issue.
It's hugely sensitive, and the problem is now, because of what happened with the first referendum and the fact that you've now got the deal approved through the Colombian legislature but not through another referendum, you don't have a popular mandate for the deal which now exists.
Well, in the UK, you are discussing at this very moment what is the role of Parliament in treaties like Brexit. Is Parliament going to intervene or not? In our Constitution, there are two specific articles which says Congress is the representative of the people, and they have the power. We have negotiated 9 peace agreements, and where have these peace agreements gone to? Congress. And as I told you, I was not obligated to put this to a referendum. I put it, we lost for a small margin. I learned my lesson. Even the opposition did not want the referendum, and I think it's my duty, my obligation, to avoid more polarization.
It seems to me there's still a lot of potential, a lot of scope for things to go wrong. Right now, the Constitutional Court in your country is considering whether to give you the sort of fast-track authority to carry through some of the measures that are vital to making this process work, including the amnesty law and a whole raft of other things that the FARC say must happen if they are to disarm. How worried are you that this process could yet fall off the rails?
Well, this has been a very difficult process. A war of 52 years. To end it, of course, is a very cumbersome process, and we have encountered many obstacles, many challenges that we have been fixing and eliminating through perseverance. Now, this particular case of the Constitutional Court, what is the issue is the fast track to shorten the time between the signature of the agreement and the implementation.
But the bottom line is, if you don't get that authority and you can't deliver these changes quickly, including the amnesty law, the FARC say, you can forget about us disarming and going to these special safe areas. We're not going to do it. So this could go wrong.
They are now moving towards those safe areas. We still have a shorter procedure in the Congress through regular means to, for example, approve the amnesty law this same year, this year. But I am very confident, and I hope that the Constitutional Court will give its blessing to the fast track.
Here's perhaps a bigger, more unpredictable problem. In an ironic way, you now depend on the safety and the protection of the FARC leaders and indeed the FARC militants generally, because if other elements, I'm thinking of paramilitary remnants, criminal gangs, if they start to target the FARC leadership, to kill them, to assassinate them, the long-term effect will be that the FARC may well go back to the battlefield. So you now need to supervise and guarantee the safety of your former enemies. Yes. Are you able to do that?
Yes, and we have set a special commission presided by me as president, with the armed forces, with the Attorney General, with NGOs that defend human rights, and representatives of the FARC to follow very, very closely the process in order to guarantee their safety. But this is something quite unique. Our soldiers, our policemen, which were the ones who fought the FARC, are now protecting them. This is very, very
but Mr. President, there are worrying signs, you know better than I, that in the last 2 months or so there have been a series of targeted killings of social activists, most of them broadly leftist. Now, they're not FARC people, but they're people who are associated with leftist politics. And the FARC have said this: the surge in paramilitary actions, the killings against our civilian population and political and social leaders is casting a long shadow.
And we are on top of that, and we have had meetings with the representatives of the FARC people. And
who's behind these killings, do you believe?
The Attorney General has made a thorough investigation. What he said so far is that there's no systematic intention. These are killings that have happened in the areas where the FARC has left. There are areas where there's illegal mining, and there's the coca plantations and drug trafficking. Yeah. And it has to do more, it's more related with this dispute of what's going to happen with that business, more than a systematic sort of intention to repeat what the FARC and the country lived 20, 30 years ago.
But it's very interesting to me, Mr. President, that you say it is now a different country. We have moved on. In some ways, the profound problems that lay at the heart of the insurgency for so long have not been eradicated in Colombia. I'm just thinking of one example: the gross economic inequality in your country, the fact that 50% of all Colombia's land is in the hands of less than 1% of your population. You're still a profoundly unequal society.
Let me tell you that in the last 5, 6 years, we have decreased poverty by 12%, 12 points. I received it with 40 and now it's in 28. 4,600,000 Colombians have been brought out of poverty. I have been able to reduce extreme poverty in half, 50%. We have created more than 4.3 million formal employments. For the first time, the difference between rich regions and poor regions have been narrowing. So has the difference between rich people and poor people. We have a long way to go still, but we're going in the right directions. Let me tell you something else. We now have, for the first time, universal coverage of our health system. Everybody has the right to be treated by the health system, and we have free education for every single Colombian.
And one other area where you still have a huge amount of work to do is on eradicating the drugs trade. And that's another way in which for so long the FARC and other militant groups have funded their activities and frankly criminalized your society. Now, here's the truth. Colombia remains today, according to the US, the single largest source of cocaine coming into America, double the supplies coming from Peru and Bolivia combined.
Yes.
You have failed to eradicate the drugs trade.
The world has failed in the war on drugs. And I've been saying this for the last 5 years. The war on drugs declared by the world, by the UK, the US, Europe, and the whole world in the United Nations 40 years ago has not been won.
So with the authority of the Nobel Peace Prize on your shoulders, what is your message to the world today?
That we have to address the war on drugs, which is creating more damage than all the wars that are being fought together combined. And Colombia has been the country that has put the highest cost, the highest sacrifice in this war on drugs. Now, this particular peace agreement will give us, for the first time, the opportunity to find a structural solution to the illegal crops. Why? Because before, we went with our soldiers, our policemen, our civilian eradicators to these very remote regions. We were met by the FARC, among others, with snipers or landmines. We are the second most mined country in the whole world after Afghanistan. And it was very difficult. We went there at a very high cost, eradicated 1,000 hectares, 2,000 hectares, went back, and the day after, they just planted more. Well, now we will have the opportunity to go with the state and give an alternative for the first time to the peasants.
Just a quick thought before we end on one unknowable for the future. You've had strong support from Barack Obama in pursuing this peace agreement and in the quote-unquote war on drugs, which you say, frankly, hasn't worked. Donald Trump is about to enter the White House. You've expressed, you did during the campaign in September, you said Trump's policies aren't in sync with what Colombia wants from the United States. So how concerned are you that a Trump presidency will not offer Colombia the support it needs as it tries to make this peace agreement stick?
Well, fortunately, we have had a bipartisan foreign policy with the United States. Both Republicans and Democrats have supported Plan Colombia, which was the deal that the United States made. It was a bipartisan foreign policy initiative, which has been the most successful, I think, in the U.S.
I mean, we're almost out of time, but your thoughts on Trump, how concerned are you that he won't support you in the way that Obama did?
We hope that the Republicans will continue to support, as they have supported us in the last 15, 20 years. So I hope that he will support us, but we don't know as up to today what's his policy going to be. I hope he looks at the region south of Rio Grande and sees that there is a strategic interest for the United States there.
In a word, you really believe this peace deal is going to work?
Yes.
No doubts.
No doubt.
We have to end there, but President Juan Manuel Santos, congratulations again, and thank you for being with me
Thank you
on
very
Hard
much.
Talk.